If you buy a luxury car, the most unluxurious part of these cars is the engine. I love burning dinosaur juices and guts as much as anybody else, but we have to face facts here. EVs are the future. Wow. For luxury cars. I don't think they're the future for sports cars, performance cars. When cars like the Lucid exist, why would anybody look at a Model S and say, yeah, I want that? Look at this thing. We're going to take this car for a ride. We're going to examine it. We're going to look inside and out. We're going to grade it. I'm back at Aston Martin Lotus, and this time around we're looking at the Lucid. This is the Air Dream Edition performance model. 1,111 horsepower. This particular car has the 451 mile range because it's equipped with the 21s. If this had the standard 19s, it would go up to 471 miles of range. I am not a big EV guy. I will say that forthright right now. Not a big fan of EVs, but luxury cars, the most unluxurious part of any car is the engine. And I think this is where EVs make sense. I've only driven a handful of them, not even a handful, probably two. I've been in a Model 3 and I drove a Jaguar I-Pace, and I like the I-Pace quite a lot actually. And so from a luxury perspective, EV cars make all the sense in the world. Having driven the Rolls-Royce Ghost just a few weeks ago, the one and only unluxurious thing about that motor, just no matter how great a V12 is, was that you can hear it when you're on the throttle, even ever so slightly. This is where EV cars like this come into play. They eliminate so much more noise. And look at that, because I'm near the car, and the door handles just kind of popped open for me because it's assuming that I'm going to jump in and go for a drive, which we will. Lucid is, of course, the newest kid in town as far as the EV game is concerned. It's a really, really good looking car. I love how they look. They look so unlike anything else out there. Way better than any Tesla on the market. I don't care what Tesla you throw this in. Don't tell me Roadster, because the Roadster isn't even out yet, and God knows when that'll be available. But that is a really handsome looking car. I see these here and there. They don't really have a great dealer network at the moment, because if you're in Florida, you've got to service these cars down in the Miami area. So I'm in Central Florida, and Miami area is about 200 miles away. So I believe it's Palm Beach or Fort Lauderdale, somewhere around there. So we're going to take this car out for a ride. We're going to explore the interior. We're going to talk about the exterior, and we're going to grade it all. Of course, Lucid is very new. People still don't know whether or not they can trust them, but just from walking around this car briefly right now, I can already tell you that the build quality on this is better than any Tesla I've seen. And I had mentioned earlier, it looks better than any Tesla I have seen. Some people are kind of put off by this little bit right here, and that's because this trunk area is essentially a clamshell. This whole bit opens up. Now, I would normally do that. I would open up the trunk with the key fob, except the key fob is this. It's really weird. It's just one button in the middle. It just detents. It's not even an actual button. So you press this in the middle here, and then it locks or unlocks. There is no trunk button, there's no frunk button. So we're gonna find a way to pop this open. There it is. Now look at that. Look at that open. That is something. So it's not short on space. You can bring the seats down using these on both sides. Oh, you've got some additional storage over here, more cargo. You've got some secret little compartments. You've got a 12 volt here. Got another little compartment down there. Now let's head over to the front. Now, to get access to the Frunk, I don't believe there's a button. I couldn't find anything up front. So what you do is you go into the menu, you go to openings, and you click here. And the front just opened. There it goes. Look at that. How wild is that? We'll get to all this interior. We'll get to all that in just a little bit. But let's take a look at that trunk. So here you've got some more space. You got your charging cables. Not exactly grocery worthy space. This is just primarily to store a few small items. This is purely just a little bonus, if you will. Look, soft close latch too. Really nice, very nice touch. So as I'd mentioned earlier, this is your key fob. See if we can get a little focus on that. There it is. There are no traditional buttons here. You just press kind of right here in the middle, and then what you do is, to open it, you kind of touch right over here. Doors open, you hop in, and now let's take a look at this interior. Inside, we've got, well, soft closed doors, again. We've got this kind of, these days, traditional giant touch screen that runs almost more than half the length or width of this interior. So this is how you know you're in the future, when your car is beeping and booping at you and telling you, hey, update me. I'm gonna do that now. So every time you start the car, that's going to be a message up there until you actually do it. So it's an over-the-air update. I'll be completely honest with you. I've never been in a Lucid before. I don't know exactly everything that's going on here. So I'm new to this, just as probably many of you are as well. First of all, initial impressions. There are some recycled materials here, and that's kind of the point of Lucid. But they feel very nice. I think this is could be actual suede or maybe a synthetic suede of some sort, but it feels nice. Pardon my band-aid over there. I cut myself and started bleeding earlier on, but this all feels really nice. The steering wheel looks cool. It's got these interesting little, this is the volume rocker, so that's the volume switch. Oh, we don't want that. That's the volume rocker. You press into it and it mutes everything. Not sure what this does. Nothing's changing over here, but I'm assuming it's got something to do with the display over here. In any case, you've got your headlights, defrosters, windshield. You've got a lot of your traditional steering wheel options that are now here in this little touch screen. You've got your display that tells you all of your central information, and then you've got kind of an auxiliary display over here that's tied into this. I mean, you've got a shortcut to the navigation here that'll also display the nav here, which is interesting. But you can operate this independently of that. So as you can see, I'm kind of moving this and that's standing still. So that's a neat little touch. Another neat little touch is you can actually get rid of this. There's storage back here. So the way you access the storage is you press this little button right here, and you kind of swipe up all the way, and there it goes. It's a lot of storage too. You could fit quite a lot in here. And then to do that, you kind of swipe back down. It comes back. Really cool touch. I don't recall seeing this in any other car. I'm going to turn the fan speed down. So I love this. A little bit of redundancy. So having to dig through climate controls all the time is just a massive pain. So a little redundancy is having the climate controls here and then having them on the screen. I can turn down the fan speed. I can adjust the temperature as well on both sides. So let's go back to the home screen, and I'm getting little shortcuts as well here. So you've got your drive select modes. You've got smooth, swift, and sprint. Now obviously a car with 1100 plus horsepower, I don't even know how smooth would feel, but I'm assuming it's got something to do with the accelerator pedal, because this isn't a throttle. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in swift, and then we're going to work our way back and forth. You've got some additional, you got your trunk locks, steering wheel. What's this do? Oh, okay, this is to adjust your steering wheel up and down. So your steering controls are over here to adjust how close you want it. It might be a little too silly to kind of have all that embedded in this. Always prefer to have something along here, but nope, there is no adjuster or joystick or anything of that nature on the side of the steering wheel. Everything seems to be really focused in on this right here, so we will have to get used to that. Well, you got massaging seats. which Rolls-Royce Ghost did not have as standard, but this car I believe is 100 and I don't recall the actual MSRP on this car, but somebody tell me in the comments below. I believe it was about $140,000, somewhere along those lines. But this has massaging seats, which is really nice, always handy for some long journeys. We've got themes. We've got seat adjustments over here as well. So let me see. You can adjust your seats from the seat is down there, but you can also adjust some more things over here. So if you're extra lazy and you don't feel like reaching down, or maybe you just did your nails and you don't want to scratch them or crack them or whatever it is that can happen to newly done nails, you have the option of adjusting your seats through the touchscreen. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so then if you slide down, you can go back to your display there. So this is interesting actually. So you can mimic the displays just by sliding down. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Learning curve for this interior is going to be pretty high for, I think, a lot of people who are not used to this kind of technology. If you're coming from and maybe an older S-Class, 1 or 2 generations older, there's going to be a learning curve here. You will have to get used to this. If you're a younger driver who made some quote-unquote crypto money, you probably will acclimate to this relatively quickly. Me personally, I'm just more interested in getting in this and just taking it for a drive, because I am really, really, really curious about how this drives. So lastly, what I will say is the quality of materials is really nice. This feels very premium. I cannot complain. This is recycled of some sort. It feels plasticky, but what I don't see is any crazy panel gaps, and we'll see if the interior rattles when you drive it. I hope it doesn't, because I can't stand expensive cars with rattly interiors. The door handle over here is very interesting. So it's kind of like you do one of these. If you could see what my finger's doing, it's like a trigger. So you push back like that, and the door pops open. There's a material over here, again, feels like a synthetic suede. It's very nice, soft to the touch. You've got some synthetic leather of some sort as well here. You've got some cloth material here, and then I believe this might be vinyl down here. So overall, just an assortment of different materials to kind of create these door panels over here. Now, because this is an electric vehicle, you've got motors instead of an engine. There's no drive shaft in the way, so you've got a totally flat floor. Let's take a look here. Let's close this door. Well, that's plastic. It's an interesting design. I'm not sure why this is plastic. I think these are speakers. These are door speakers right here. Now look at this view. You feel like you're outside all the time. That is so cool. Here's one thing I didn't notice, is that when you're sitting here driving the car, your head is protected from the sun with these little visors that are above you, which is an interesting little touch. I did not notice that sitting there first. You've got some climate adjustments, your sunshade. Overall, a fairly frill-free back seat. There's not really a whole lot going on here. You've kind of got your main necessities. Oh, some more storage over here. Pockets, but there's a lot of room. This is almost, we're getting close to the Rolls-Royce level of rear leg room here. This is a lot. I'm actually very surprised at that. There's just a ton of room. I'd say close to maybe approaching a foot. It's a lot of room, without a doubt. And that would be my driving position, just barely past that B pillar. And so whoever sits here would be extremely comfortable, and sitting behind myself, I've got easily 1 foot of room. So this is a very spacious back seat, and I've got a lot of headroom as well. Now I gotta say one little thing. Maybe I was a little too premature about these panel gaps. They're actually, I don't know, they're a bit Tesla-ish. I'm surprised to see that. I had heard the opposite. So, and this is a clean Carfax buy. This car had never been in any accidents or anything like that. So this is a pretty decent panel gap over here. The paint quality there's some orange peel going on here. And again, no accidents. It doesn't look like anything's been repainted. This looks like pretty factory orange peel. For the money, I would have expected just a little bit more. Yeah, and the gap here, see the gap over here is completely different than the gap on the other side. So they are a little bit uneven. But the orange peel is about the same on both sides. So I think Lucid might still have a little bit of work left to do to iron out some of the kinks, but this is also a pretty early model car. This is the Dream Edition. That said, I would take this over a Model S Plaid any day of the week. And I think it's time we go for a drive. We are in the Lucid. And we're gonna go for a drive. It's gonna be interesting. There's so much going on here. I just had to adjust the steering wheel through the screen. I've got to adjust the mirrors through the screen. That's kind of where we are with electric vehicles, is that they're going to get weird and quirky like this, where everything is operated through all sorts of new gizmos that we didn't necessarily need. I sound like an old person. I'm not that old. I'm 37 at the time of filming here. But you've got a stalk that puts you in drive, and you could feel wow, you just really felt those motors engaged. Almost as if you put a transmission into drive and the torque converter kind of engaged. That was really interesting. We're in smooth now. I'm going to start in swift. And we'll go back and forth between the two modes. Alright, let's go. Oh. Okay. So the throttle response is not quite like a Tesla. The sound is pleasing to the ear. It's got a somewhat high-pitched whine. Sounds like I'm in a spaceship. It's very sci-fi. My ankle's not quite used to the level of pressure I have to apply to this pedal over here to really get some momentum out of the car. So I've got to kind of reconfigure my head right now and realize, well, you need a little more to get this car motivated. And I have to apologize, I see my camera shaking a little bit. I bought a new mount, that mount was no good. So I'm using my old mount, it's a little bit shaky. But at the same time, it might give you an idea of the suspension. And if you can compare it to some of my other videos, the suspension of this car, it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. So far, I'm on pretty smooth roads. I'm on a relatively smooth roads. There's no potholes or anything like that. And thus far, this is a pretty enjoyable suspension, especially on these 21s that are pretty low profile as well. One thing that's really putting me off right now is that throttle sensitivity. Throttle, I should say, the pedal sensitivity or accelerator sensitivity. So there's no throttle here. I can instantly tell that this car is designed for comfort as opposed to performance, even though this is the performance car. So I can't really imagine what the range version is. I believe the range has an R on the back as opposed to this, which has a P on the back next to the badge. So we're gonna go over here, which is where I like to kind of throw the cars just a little around and get a feel for some of the roads in this little parking lot. It's a giant parking lot, I should say. Let's see how this car copes with a couple of turns. I'm not gonna push it. This thing is heavy. Yeah, I believe these cars approach 3 tons. Whoa, there we go. Wow. It's something else to really feel that kind of power. So surprisingly, I actually think this car handles pretty well for its size, for the type of car that it is, right? Everything is relevant, and my grading system is relevant. I always add that little tidbit in the description below where I mention, look, I'm not comparing a Lamborghini Urus to a Lamborghini Huracan, because that just makes no sense. So if you see an Urus get a 42 and a Huracan get a 42, well, that doesn't mean that both cars are even. They're not equal. They're just relative to their category. That's where they're placed. So if I happen to do an Aston Martin DBX 707, which I will, and I've driven that car before, that's something to compare against the Urus, or even a Cullinan, or even a Range Rover these days, especially a P530 or one with a V8, in other words. Yeah. I believe the reason why this accelerator pedal requires so much pressure is because this car has 1,000+ horsepower. And I think the last thing that people want, or Lucid wants, is inexperienced drivers, inexperienced drivers jumping into the seat of one of these things, tippy-toeing the throttle and going straight into a tree. I think that's really an unideal situation, because in the United States, our driving examination isn't exactly very foolproof. Any schmuck can buy one of these a day after passing their driver's license exam. And that's always a concern. In fact, anybody in the United States gets their driver's license can go and buy a car that weighs up to 10,000 pounds, so the Hummer included. So far, suspension is really good. Better than I thought it would be. Again, considering that this car is on massive wheels with rubber bands for tires, this is way better than I thought it would be. It handles better than I thought it would. Drives better than I thought it would. So far, I'm a believer. But again, as I said at the beginning of this video, my hot take has always been this. If you buy a luxury car, or if you want a luxury car, the most unluxurious part of these cars is the engine. And it always will be the engine. I love burning dinosaur juices and guts as much as anybody else, but we have to face facts here. EVs are the future. Wow. EVs are the future for luxury cars. I don't think they're the future for sports cars, performance cars. Not having to hear the rumble of an engine, whether it's a V8 or V12, in a luxury car, is actually kind of pleasing. Because if I'm driving 300 miles from here to South Florida, or 220 miles from here to Miami, and I've got kids, or my wife's falling asleep, my kids are falling asleep, and I'm trying to make a pass, and there's a bit of roar, that'll wake up a kid. And you're trying to keep everyone quiet and happy for as long as humanly possible. And I think this is where cars like this come into play. If you're looking for utmost luxury, you want an EV. You want a luxurious EV. Now, I know that Mercedes has the EQS, but quite frankly, they're not powerful enough, and they're ugly. I mean, they're not very pleasing to look at. Whereas you have a car like this, the Lucid, is handsome. It needs a few touch-ups as far as certain build quality aspects. It does have some panel gaps here and there. They're not quite as bad as I thought they would be. And they certainly aren't quite as bad as a Tesla. So far, the only real noticeable panel gap was that massive trunk where it was kind of uneven on both sides. But thus far, I haven't really seen anything else that's made me feel turned off by this car. I think if I were in the market for an electric vehicle, this would certainly be at the top of my list. Interestingly enough, what's kind of cool right now is that every time I use the turn signal on either side of this display, on the other side of this display over here, it'll show me the lane. So it'll basically assist my blind spot. It'll tell me if there's anything in my blind spot by activating one of those cameras in the mirror. Now, I'd mentioned multiple times that this car has well over 1,000 horsepower, 1,111 horsepower to be exact, on the performance model. I believe it's just under 900 on the range model. Now, what does that mean? So again, I like stats. I'm a big quarter-mile trap speed kind of guy, and in this car, the quarter mile will pass in the high 9s at 146, 147 miles per hour, And I also believe that the accelerator pedal response has something to do with that as well, because again, you need quite a bit of effort to tell this car, yes, I want to teleport. At which point it responds and says, okay. I'm not saying that this is laggy by any means, certainly not laggy, but there's more motion or more movement required in that pedal to get the full power that you actually desire. So let's say if I'm pressing the pedal this much right now, and I'm only kind of moving forward ever so slightly at about 10 miles per hour. But that kind of throttle response on an ICE like my M3 or the McLaren, I'd be accelerating fairly rapidly at that point. Let's move this thing into sprint. Got more sound. Yes, so this is where the pedal response becomes noticeably better. I would drive this car personally in sprint all the time. Sprint activation mode enables maximum power and torque. Oh, okay. So it's telling me that if I am a skilled driver, I should only use this mode if I'm a skilled driver. Confirm. I believe I'm skilled enough. Famous last words. So I guess the fine people at Lucid agree that we can't be handing these cars out to anybody with a driver's license, and they would like to validate, hey, do you know how to drive a 1,000 horsepower car? If so, press yes here. Thus far in this drive, I've done about 6 miles, AC blasting, and it's only gone down about 1 percentage point. So I started off with 16. Now I'm at 15, and that was with a few pulls, so a little bit of some stopping and waiting at lights, etc. Well, on top of that, actually, I was in the car recording footage, going over the interior while I had the AC running, and that probably doesn't deplete it as much as it actually driving, but nonetheless, accessories were running. So there is a creep mode, and that's not a weird thing to say, because in this car it's called stop mode. So you can either creep forward or roll backwards. So actually it'll hold it, you can either hold the car stationary or allow it to roll back, so I could switch it. Furthermore, I can change the regen to be standard or high. Right now it's set to standard. Stability control is full, so I don't really want to do anything too silly. So we're going to keep stability control on, especially after the Cars and Coffee video that I just recently made that a lot of people seem to like, so I better practice what I preach. Although it would be interesting to take this thing on a track and just see what it's capable of doing, because I can imagine that this would be a blast. It's a heavy car, don't get me wrong, but I can imagine it would be a blast on a track just to kind of feel that power coming out of a corner, as it would just kind of suck you into the seat. So overall, my final comments: if you're looking for a luxury EV and you're torn between an EQS or a Model S Plaid or this, go with this. I would, just based on looks alone. It's a no-brainer. Before I go, one of the weirdest things about the Lucid is when you're done driving, there's no on or off button. You just put the car in park, you walk out, remember to take the key with you, and then you lock it. And that's it.